a lot of Jewish people that I've spoken to that are on the correct side of history feel very isolated, and very much so, whether it's family or just their community that they're used to sort of being part of. I mean, I have people that are not talking to me and haven't spoken to me in months.
But when did it start for you? Like, I mean, I don't, maybe, I know I don't want to interview you, but
yeah, November was when it really started happening for me, which now that I think about it, it makes sense because I've said it sort of repeatedly. For me, I give everyone a 3-week grace period post October 7th to get their head on straight. And if your head hasn't gotten on straight in that first 3 weeks, while I do appreciate everybody coming over at any point in time, we welcome all converts over to the right side of history. But for me personally, as people in my personal life, I give a 3-week grace period. And when you were not on the right side of history in that amount of time, you're not my people.
Right.
And that's just my personal, in my mind, that's sort of where I'm at. And so, yeah, I would say 3 weeks after October 7th was when I think I started really ramping up about my thoughts on this and where I stand on this. And it alienated some of my people.
But when did you start your first campaign in 2020?
Yeah.
Were you speaking about it then?
No. Now, when I was running in 2020, privately, and personally, I very much was aware of what was going on at that point. In my personal life, amongst my non-campaign people, was very clear that I was sure that Israel was an apartheid state, and that I knew that they were in violation of international law. I knew I knew that Gaza was a concentration camp. Like, I was already where I am now with that. The only difference was in 2020 was I still was sort of holding out hope that there was the possibility of a 2-state solution. Mm-hmm. Whereas now I don't even, honestly.
That is sort of the last step in the process.
Right. That was sort of the final thing. But campaign-wise, it wasn't one of the key issues, quite honestly. I mean, we weren't in the situation we're in right now. And I was really focusing, like I normally do, on things like healthcare and housing and living wage jobs, which are, prior to, October 7th, was the main things that I was focusing on in terms of, our campaign. Like, right. What would be my main talking points would be those issues. And they still are for a lot of people, because those are still very important issues.
Right, but this, I mean, I guess in a very direct way, in terms of where money is going, ties into some of that. Yeah.
It does. And for me, and also, since you don't know me well and whatever, one of the things that we talk about a lot here is the idea of modern monetary theory, which I don't know if you're familiar with modern monetary theory, but it's the premise that it is not a pie, right? Like, we look at it. So like, if our tax dollars, we say our tax dollars are going to this, so that's what our tax dollars federally don't go anywhere. They don't go anywhere. They don't do anything. That doesn't mean anything. No, there's not some lady sitting in a room counting up the tax dollars and saying, okay, now we can spend this much here and this much here, right? It doesn't work that way. And so at the end of the day, that concept, to me, it's important because it feeds this austerity myth, this pie concept that we're taught, so that we're always fighting over resources and fighting over scraps when we don't need to be. And so while it does infuriate me that our collective resources and that we're sanctioning and funding a genocide, I just don't ever like the kind of link to it to our tax dollars. That is sort of just like, because it perpetuates that myth that if we're paying for this thing, we can't have this, when in fact we could have it all. So that is that
because like money is not real and they just print whatever. Like, what's the basis for? I don't know. You're blowing my mind. Like, this is
okay. So I'm going to suggest, we've covered this many times. We have a friend of our show. His name is Steve Grumbine, and he is my MMT guru. But actually, there are books about this, and the concept is, okay, your federal tax dollars, right? It has nothing to do with the budget or what we do. That's just money that gets deleted into thin air. It doesn't pay for anything. state and municipal tax dollars, that pays for things because they're not currency creators, right? Like you have to be a currency issuer for that to be the case. So it only applies to federal income tax. Let me be very clear on that.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Doesn't Florida like not have any taxes?
We don't have income tax. We don't have state income tax here. Correct.
Okay. Other taxes you have?
Oh, we have property taxes. We have sales taxes. We have all sorts of taxes. But yeah, MMT is important as somebody that is on the progressive side of things because the constant battle that we get is how you going to pay for it. When in fact, we pay for it by how we pay for everything else, like the war in Israel, right? The genocide in Israel. We pay for it the same way. Our government decides what it wants to spend money on, and it issues that money. That's how it works. Now, the tax dollars regulates the economy. It regulates things. And obviously, there are issues that have to be thought about, like inflation and Steve is going to be so proud of me for this. Steve's going to be so proud of me for this. But yeah, and I wish I understood it as well as economists that know this understand it. But at the end of the day, I'm just words matter. And I really want to get away from the austerity myth that if our tax dollars is what decides what we can and cannot afford, because that's not how it works. No. Not with international, not with the military industrial complex.
No, but basically what we're dealing with is a system that the money is being distributed, but it's basically like a clogged hose where only a very small percentage of the economic makeup in this country is getting their hands on the money. You could say it's the banking system. You could say it's the multinational corporations like Amazon and Walmart. But the fact of the matter is they are the ones that are getting the resources, the job creators, if you will. And so we could have universal health care easily because it actually costs less than what we're paying now. That is a proven fact.
That I do know. But I'm so down with economy, like, you know what?
Yeah, well, that's why it's always interesting when I meet people that find me for a particular topic and other stuff is new. And, we've been doing this show for over 3.5 years now. And so we have so much content on these things that I sometimes do sort of take it for granted because we have our regulars and we have people that follow. But it's called modern monetary theory. Okay. And there's you could like easily look up like the basic concept of it without having to read like a dissertation. But it's important to know if you support things like single payer healthcare or you support things like tuition-free public college, that when people say how you're going to pay for it, this is what we need to understand to combat that austerity narrative.
Okay, this is good for me to know because, I guess I came into the U.S. from Canada and probably from one of the most like social program oriented provinces. And I realized that I pay, certainly in New York, as a New York resident, more tax actually here than I did in Canada. And of course, I get almost like zero for it. And it's a very wealthy country. I pay a lot of tax. New York is an extremely wealthy city, and, pieces of the subway are falling on your head or it's raining on you or it's like, and why? So in my mind, it's going to the military. That's why.
You want to know why? Because I can tell you why that is, because I see it every day. He knows what I call it. It's de facto corruption. And what that is to me, and I see it every day when I drive in Florida and we're on the highways and our infrastructure looks like trash, like we're a country that has no resources. And yet I know I live in one of the richest states in the country, not just in a rich country, but in one of the richest states in the country. And it looks like it does. The only explanation is corruption. So here's what I know. I know that the state has the money. The money goes in because here's an example where our tax dollars do pay. Because this is state. So the money goes in and yet the work doesn't get done. And in law school, we call that res ipsa loquitur, which is the thing speaks for itself. And it basically proves its own case. And that's what that is. Res, R-E-S, ipsa, I-P-S-A, loquitur, L-O-Q-U-I-T-O-R, loquitur.
Okay, yeah.
but we just say res ipsa. And that means like, yeah, it's like something that you know only happens because of this, right? Like there's no other explanation. That's what this is. And that is why the subway is caving in. That is why. It is not because they can't afford to do it. That is not why.
You know
it is
what,
because somebody's skimming the money.
I want to see one of those, those like that cartoon of like how a bill becomes a law.
Yes.
But like with the money.
Schoolhouse Rocks, like a real one.
Like where like you pay your tax and then like where,
Actually,
like,
if you're
I need.
Actually, you should look up a show. Our friend Steve, that is my MMT person. Do you watch YouTube? Obviously, you watch some stuff, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. So he has a show called Real Progressives, and he also has a podcast called Macro and Cheese, and it's all about basically like macroeconomics for dummies. Which is perfect for me. And that is how I've learned a lot of the things that I've learned. And I've even been a guest. I think I win the record for like the dumbest guest that's probably been on Macro and Cheese. But and then he even does something called Macro and Chill, which is just even the recap of the Macro and Cheese. But anyway, that would be a good thing if you're interested in this.
I should say, and also I think, for people that are watching this, that you are very smart and I am very smart. But there are, especially people that go to law school, like, we have a facility for understanding like certain things, certainly the legal system and reasoning and logic and words. But the money thing, the economy, it's like,
yeah, it's a whole different animal.
I think it's almost done on purpose so that nobody can really understand like what the stock market is doing.
It helps rich people. The stock market is only rich people.
It's all fake.
It only affects a very small percentage of people. It's rich people, how well they're doing. That's what the stock market tells you, is how well the rich people are doing.